Welcome to Unleashing Happiness with Cecilia Hendricks, the podcast where I teach you how to change your mindset, change your habits, and change your life. Welcome back to the bonus episodes. This is the week 4, and I am super excited about this one. This is probably one of the things that I found the most helpful on my journey and that I continue to go back to and remind myself of. This is the week that I'm going to share my tools that I've used for myself over the years with great success to shift my thoughts when I'm going down a path that I don't want to, or when I'm struggling in kind of a loop of thinking about what could go wrong or what's not going right, or thinking about other people in a way that I don't want to, having mental arguments or putting myself down. There's whatever kind of negative thinking that you're going down a path, it's something that you don't want to be thinking about, or it's something that is not in alignment with kind of the way that you've identified you do want to think and you do want to focus. So a lot of times, instead of beating myself up and being like, oh, you're not supposed to think that way, you're being negative, you're doing this kind of stuff and being upset with myself about it, I just remind myself, this isn't the way I want to think anymore. This is a product of an old habit loop. It's nothing more than that. And these are nothing more than thoughts. And a thought can be, quote unquote negative. A thought can be positive, but really it's just a thought. And the only reason that I identify them as negative or use the word negative is if it's something that's not in alignment with the way that I want to think. It's not in alignment with the life that I want to live, the qualities of self that I want to continue to focus on. Otherwise, I don't really think of them as negative anymore. My thoughts are more just neutral. They're just a thought. And I've taken a lot of the power away from these like random thoughts that I have, because the power is actually in what I choose to dwell in. The power is in me making a choice to say, you know what? I don't want to feel that way anymore. I don't want to continue this anymore. Now that I'm aware of it, I'm able to make the changes. And that's really so powerful. Once you take that step of knowing like, hey, I actually have a choice here. I'm able to make a decision to start working on myself and working on the way that my mind works and is programmed. And that can come out in many different ways. There's many different processes that you can go through. And the greatest kind of gift I think you can give to yourself is honoring yourself enough to try to figure out what's going to work for you. I do want to take a moment here, though, to remind you and also to let anybody new know I am not a licensed therapist. I do not have a degree in any type of scientific field. I have just made a choice to start working on myself a few years ago. I wanted to find more fulfillment in my life. I wanted to have more joy in my life. And I wanted to really start to understand how my own mind works and the ways that I can affect my own mood. And I started down a path that really led me to a lot of spiritual leaders, and then eventually led me to learning more of the scientific side as well as the spiritual side. And when I paired those two together and started really focusing on my own identity, the state that I was dwelling in, the ways that I was spending my day, the habits that I have, the routines that I have, my life has really changed, and it continues to change. My way that my mind works, the way that I think about myself, the way that I think about others, the way that I treat myself and the way that I treat others has drastically changed. I believe I'm a better partner. I'm a better friend. I'm a better parent. I'm a better sibling. I'm a better human being overall for me and myself because of these things that I've learned. And I wanted to share those with others. But with that, like I said, I am not a licensed therapist. So if you are really struggling, if you're having trouble seeing light at the end of the tunnel, if you are considering hurting yourself or have considered hurting others, please definitely reach out to a licensed therapist in your area. There are so many resources that are available. I definitely wish that there was more, and I wish that there was a better cost option for a lot of folks, especially in the US. But please try to find someone that you can reach out to that is in your area and is a licensed therapist. If you do need help locating somebody in your area, I don't know how much help I can provide, but I will provide any that I absolutely can. So if you are in that position and you need help finding somebody to talk to, please definitely send me an email, unleashinghappiness@ceciliahendricks.com, and I will do my best to point you in the right direction to either find someone or to find, a hotline that you're able to talk to. I just really want to make sure that everybody gets the level of assistance and help that they need for the position that they're in. And there is no shame in whatever position that you're in. I've spoken a lot about the book More Yourself by Sarah Waters. Sarah is somebody that I know personally, and then I absolutely adored her book. She is one of those humans that I think just when you're around her, it's like being around a little bit of sunshine, and that comes through in her book. And she's very raw and real about her own journey, in the book, and shares kind of her path to finding more for herself as well, and being able to reconnect with herself as a human being. And a lot of the book talks about how you just have different parts of yourself. And there's no bad parts. There's no parts that are worse than others. Even if there's a part of you that is considering harming yourself, that part is acting out in that way or is becoming louder to get your attention because it feels on some sort of level that it's protecting you. There's some sort of pain that this response feels like it's going to address by, going in this direction. So when you have a part that is being loud, whether it's, over angry, if you feel like you are considering hurting yourself, if you are lashing out at others, if you don't want to go outside, whatever it is, it's just a part of you that is trying to protect you. You are in a position that your body and your mind is saying, I need to help you and protect you. And this is the way that we're going to do it, which means there's no bad parts. It's just a piece of you that wants to help you. And when it comes down to it, your mind is always seeking the ways to not only confirm that you're right, but that to make sure that you avoid kind of any type of pain, so this is really a survival instinct and there's nothing to be ashamed of. But I do want to make sure that everybody gets the level of help that they need. If you're not quite to that level of wanting to reach out to a licensed therapist, or you've been working with one and you're just looking for kind of some additional tools, these are things that have helped me, and I definitely hope that they would help you as well. I put these into a 14-day email course that I had sent out to a group of people and got really good feedback. And this was definitely one of the emails that I felt the best putting together because this helped me so much. I mean, I loved all the content that I put out. I only share things that I've done for me, or that I've had others say, hey, this really worked for me, but I'll always give the disclaimer of like, hey, this one didn't work for me, but maybe it'll work for you. Part of this journey is figuring out what's going to work best for you, what path is going to resonate the most with you so that you can find the most fulfillment in your life and the most joy in your everyday. I really label this as giving your mind peace. You are forgiving yourself in this process of the thoughts that you have. And maybe you've spent time beating yourself up, or maybe you've spent time parroting back a bunch of positive affirmations anytime a negative thought comes up in your mind. And those are really punishments. If you're parroting something, it's not something that you feel. You're just kind of going through the motions because you're frustrated at yourself for having this, quote unquote, negative thought. You're really just confirming to yourself that you do not have or are not the person that you're continually trying to tell yourself that you are. Now, in time, maybe the random parroting will work, and eventually it'll kind of seep into your subconscious and that'll sit. But I think there's a easier and more gentle way to get yourself from point A to point B. There was a study that was recently done, or maybe not recently done, but I recently read about it, that said labeling your emotions and kind of feelings as negative is rather detrimental to you. It actually kind of adds to that feeling of being down about the way that you're feeling. And instead, if you're able to start looking at them as neutral and as just kind of thoughts, even if you put your positive ones into more of a neutral bucket, but you can look at those as positive as well. But if you put them into this like neutral bucket, you are truly neutralizing it for yourself. And you'll be able to shift your mind, shift your thoughts, shift your state and your identity much quicker and without kind of this like bumpy feeling of that you did something wrong or that you should feel ashamed for the things that you did, because truly you shouldn't. I mean, this is just a thought. It's just a feeling. Feelings are, and every single feeling has a purpose. You may not know that purpose, but there's ways to get really curious about why you feel that way, what your mind is trying to tell you, and what your underlying belief is when like a triggering moment comes up. So it's a really great way to learn more about yourself. And the more that you can dig into learning about where you are, the reasons that you feel that way, and what you hold close to yourself, like there's parts of you that you hold much closer to your core identity. So if you think of your core identity as like your center, that's you, right? This is the me, and all these other factors of life equal up to me. And some are much closer to me than others, right? Like my kids are going to be super close to me. So if you do something that I feel is an attack on my children, my reaction is going to be much greater. There's going to be much more of an emotional and likely physical reaction to you doing something to my children, because they're probably the closest thing to the core me as anything. But like my integrity could be another one, right? Where like my integrity, I hold very close. If I tell you I'm going to do something, I'm going to do it. And part of my process, which I'll get into in some other episode, was learning how to keep that same integrity for myself. If I tell myself I'm going to do something, I'm going to do it in the same way that if I tell my children or my friends and family that I'm going to do something, that I'm going to actually do it. But you hold this stuff really close to your core self. And that's why you're likely to get triggered by those things. Everything that triggers you is because it is part of your identity. It's part of what you believe of yourself. And so if somebody attacks that, or if you have a perceived attack on that, your reaction is going to be one of a highly emotional state, and also like a physical reaction. And I don't just mean like physical lashing out physically at somebody, but I mean, you can get that tightening in your chest. You might get butterflies in your stomach. You might start to sweat a bit. Your heart rate will increase. That is a physical reaction to something close and dear to you being hurt or challenged or threatened. This is spoken a lot about in Sean Webb's book, Mind Hacking Happiness, especially volume 1. I found that book phenomenal. It really opened up a lot for me around emotional intelligence. I highly recommend it. Sean actually has a lot of content on TikTok and YouTube as well. I believe he still has a podcast, which kind of goes through some processes of like mind hacking happiness. But he's got some really great information, especially on being able to identify what you hold close to your own identity and how to remove some of the stuff that you don't want to hold as close. So his book has a lot of really great info on that. If you want to check it out, you can find it on Amazon. So during this process for myself and learning more about my own emotional reactions, my own triggers, and the ways for me to handle my own emotional intelligence, I found kind of three parts that really helped me. The first was getting curious. The second was making a plan. And the third was to give myself reminders. So those three, when I go back to those, are extremely helpful. And throughout the day, I continue to ask myself, how do I want to feel when I go to bed tonight? Is what I'm doing now or the way that I'm acting now in alignment with the way that I want to feel when I go to bed? Like if this is an ideal day and I have had an amazing day and I'm laying down in bed and I'm feeling the feeling that I have identified with, whether that's contentment, happiness, relief, whichever kind of success, whatever feeling it is my current action, my current thought, the current habit that I'm in alignment with that? And if it's not, I really want to question myself, why? What am I doing? What am I thinking of? Where am I in a routine that has kind of caused this feeling or this thought or this frustration to come up for me? So remember that we have a habit loop. We all fall into routines, and that routine gets kicked off by some sort of cue. A cue can be a person, it can be a place, it can be a smell. It's really any kind of trigger that kicks you off into a routine. And the more often that you've used this cue to fall into a routine, the more that it's been solidified as an unconscious habit loop, unconscious routine that you'll go into without even thinking. The one that I use as a great example is when you first wake up in the morning. You likely fall into a routine of doing the same thing every morning when you wake up. And it's become almost thoughtless. You don't have to consider what you're doing. It's a way to conserve energy, that you wake up and you go and you start doing the same thing that you do every day. But if you keep waking up and doing the same thing that you did yesterday and the day before and the day before that, you're going to really continue in the same daily routines that you've had until you start to interrupt those and make changes to them. And that's where the choice comes in. Because once you become aware of, oh, I want to change this, and start focusing on it and start using tools to change the routine, you still have the cue. You can't really get rid of that part, right? Like you're going to wake up, God willing, but then you're able to start interrupting your routine. So again, we're going to talk about getting curious, making a plan, and giving yourself reminders. And you can kind of do these in whichever order. I tend to make the plan first, and I'll talk about each of these kind of in detail, but I tend to make the plan first. And then when I'm in that moment, I'm able to get curious, use my plan, and then also, in advance, set up reminders for myself that I'm making a change in my life. I'm making a change in the way that my mind is working. And this is something that I'm going to focus on and do for me. So for making a plan, you're really going to make a plan for what you're going to do when unwanted thoughts come up, or you find yourself falling into a thought routine or even a physical routine that you don't want to do anymore. So you're actually going to sit down, and I recommend writing it out in your journal of, this is the way I'm going to handle when this happens. This is what I'm going to do instead. And then start to lean into getting really curious when this comes up. So when your mind goes to a negative or misaligned thought, I want you to ask yourself questions. And I mean, get really curious with yourself. Really dig into some of these questions. And then remind yourself that these are just old thoughts and that you're changing now and you're choosing to believe something different. Some of the reminders that you can do as well are like putting something physically in your face so that you remember that you're doing something different. Like maybe you can write on your mirror the kind things that you're going to say to yourself. You can leave a sticky note on your work computer that, hey, some sort of note to yourself that we're changing something. I'm not going to continue down this path. I'm going to make a new choice. And it may take time, and it's going to feel really, really unnatural and really, really uncomfortable at first, because this is different and it's change, and you are consciously working towards changing the way that you naturally fall into a habit loop. You are naturally falling into this emotional cycle that you've had repeatedly based on whatever cue got you started. And we'll talk about cues, further on, but just know that any habit goes through a loop. You've got your cue that kicks off. It's like your trigger. Then you fall into your routine, and there's some sort of reward that you're getting out of it. Whether you're aware of it or not, you're always getting a reward. And that's the reason that you're continuing. Even unhealthy habits like smoking cigarettes do give you a reward at the end. That's the reason why when the cue comes up, you're going to crave the cigarette all over again. This can go for overeating. This can go for victim mentality of, thinking nothing ever works for me. Woe is me. There's some sort of reward in that feeling as well. And I can say this because that's the routine that I was in. I was always blaming external factors for the way that I was feeling. And that was creating kind of this cycle for me. It was always somebody else. If they could stop doing XYZ, I could feel better. Well, they're not going to do that. I'm not going to control them. I'm instead going to control me and my reaction and my perception of things. And it completely changed my life. And the more that I worked with me, the internal me, the inner me, the more that great things have been reflected back to me. Other people treat me differently. I feel like my friendships are stronger. I feel like my relationships with my family is stronger. And it's all because it's being mirrored back to me. It comes down to my identity, my perceptions. And that's why I'm always encouraging folks to really prioritize yourself. Be a bit selfish. Put yourself first, because the more that you give to you, the more you have to give to those that you love and those that are around you. So when these thoughts come up, instead of getting upset with yourself, instead of writing out a plan that is like, well, if this thought comes up, I'm going to tell myself no, and I'm going to do these 8 affirmations over and over for 10 minutes. I really kind of want to maybe do a different plan than that. So instead, I want you to say, okay, my plan is when this thought comes up, I'm going to get curious. And I'm going to lean into asking myself some core questions like, why would I think that? Is this thought aligned with my ideal self? When I go to bed tonight, I know how I want to feel. Is this aligned to that? Does this contribute to the feeling that I'm seeking for when I go to bed? Do I actually believe this thought? Or is it just one that's kind of popping up and is very intrusive? Why do I believe the thought, or why don't I believe the thought? Why did I assign that meaning to the thought? And what meaning would I rather assign? When you really look at something, and this was a bit mind-blowing for me, any meaning that you assign to a thought, an event, whatever, but right now we're talking about our thoughts, any meaning that you assign is really given by you. You truly assign it. A thought does not have meaning until you give it that meaning. And maybe you gave it that meaning 10 years ago. Maybe you gave it that meaning sometime in your childhood. But there is no meaning behind any thought until you've decided that's what the meaning is. If a person treats you a certain way, or let's say, okay, here's one. Let's say somebody texts you back, K. Like you're like, I'm going to meet you for dinner at 6:30. I'll be there at 6:30. And they write you back, K. I personally don't get offended if somebody only sends me a K back. I don't care. But I know some others that get really up in arms and they're upset by this kind of response. It's not enough of a response. It is considered rude. And maybe you've picked up that meaning and that belief from society or from others telling you that that's a rude response. But it had no meaning for you until you assigned and accepted that meaning. So when you're getting curious about your thoughts, really ask yourself, what meaning have I assigned and why? And do I really want to continue with that meaning? Do I really want to continue to give this the type of power that I'm giving it now with the meaning that I've assigned? And then you can really start to change whatever meaning you have. If somebody acts a certain way, you can give it a new meaning. If you have a thought that comes up, you can give it a new meaning, or you can just take the meaning away. If I look in the mirror and I don't like the way that my butt looks that day, well, I assign that meaning to it. So I decide how important that thought was to me. I decide if I'm going to believe that and continue down that path, or if I'm just going to slowly and gently shift my mind to something else. And that's the plan that you're making, is really deciding, hey, when this comes up, I'm going to get curious. I'm going to ask myself these 3 questions and pick 3 out of the ones that I gave. That is the power that you have. And why wouldn't you have this power? And here's another great thing. The more that you get curious about it, instead of getting frustrated about it, the less that then your mind is thinking about that original thought. And now you have something new to focus on. You are actually changing the way that your mind is kind of firing, what is clicking in your own brain, and creating kind of new pathways that start to make you a more curious person instead of someone who is beating themselves up over a simple thought that you gave the meaning to anyways. Some other plans that you can make is that you are going to get up and physically move yourself. So if you're finding yourself starting to kind of go down a path that you don't want to, literally get up and go do something else. Physically move yourself. Go do something from your list of joys. If you're new and you don't know what that is, go find some of my podcast episodes or go to ceciliahendricks.com, and I've got blog posts on doing a list of joys. Walk around, decide like, hey, when this happens, I'm going to go walk around the block while asking myself my curiosity questions, splash cold water on your face, do some jumping jacks, go physically find a friend to talk to. Like, let's say you're at work and you're starting to go down that path. Get up and go find a friend to talk to about something else. Ask them how their weekend was or what kind of vacation they're going to take. Something that physically removes you from whatever kind of routine that you're in. You can also decide that when X thought comes up, you're going to remind yourself of why. The ones that I do for this is a gentle reminder that this is an old process and habit loop. It is nothing more than just an emotional loop that has been connected in my head, an emotional connection that has been made in my brain. And I have the power over the meaning of that. And so I'm not going to concern myself with this. You can make plans with friends and family, have a plan to do like when during the day to do your list of joys. So if you have a to-do list, I love to-do lists, build into that, you know, at 12 o'clock for 10 minutes, I'm going to go read a book in the sunshine because that's from my list of joys. You can also find like a fun new hobby, like whether you want to do painting, whether it's starting to work on some sort of puzzle, if you want to pick up pickleball, if you want to go play some basketball, etc. But finding new hobbies, I combined hobbies and but give yourself a fun hobby to start doing. Learn something new every single day. It will remarkably change your life and build some time into it. It doesn't have to be something huge. You can do something for 10 minutes a day, but make a plan to show up for yourself. Make a plan of what you're going to do and the way that you're going to give yourself gifts throughout the day. And make a plan that you are now aware of kind of the way that you're behaving, the things that you're doing, the things that you're thinking, and the way that you're going to shift your mindset away from those, or that you're going to start focusing on the small wins that you get throughout the day. You're going to start noticing when people are kind to you and nice to you. You have the ability to start paying conscious attention to those things, and that all comes down to having a plan. The more that you have the plan already listed and you kind of know those things that you're going to do, the more likely you are to remember them even in a triggering moment. And you can give yourself gentle reminders. I've even told myself stuff like, oh, you silly, that's an old belief and now I focus on, etc. And I just put in whatever is in the blank because I have recognized now that my thoughts are truly just because I fired something enough times that it's become a habit, and that my brain is going to automatically go to that in an attempt to conserve some energy and possibly protect me from something. And one of the most powerful things that I've learned in this process is that thoughts are just thoughts. They literally have no meaning until I assign it. And I can always take an assigned meaning, even if I've given it that meaning for the past 25 years, and decide that I'm going to change that meaning. I'm going to take away the power from that thought because I get to choose where I dwell. And thoughts are not the problem. If you are on some sort of manifestation journey or law of attraction, law of assumption journey, your thoughts are not the issue. You don't have to worry about some random intrusive thought ruining anything for you. It's the area that you dwell. Where are you continuing to return to? If you think about if you had a piece of land and it had 10 houses on it, And each house was a different kind of thought area, different state and identity. And you could go home every night and choose which house you were going to go to. You would likely start to pick your favorite house, the one that you felt the most comfortable in, and continue to return to that one. Well, the more that you return, the more that is where you're dwelling. That then becomes your house. And you can look at your thoughts, emotions, states, and identity as these different houses that you get to choose. So start picking which one you want to feel more comfortable in. And at first, it may feel unnatural, but when you consciously are waking yourself up to your own behaviors, your own thoughts, your own kind of cycles, the more that you are giving yourself the freedom and the movement to start choosing a house, even if it feels uncomfortable at first. Because consciously you've said, well, this is uncomfortable right now. This is not something that I am used to, but I'm going to continue to go back here. I'm going to make the choice to continue to return to this until it becomes more natural for me. And once it feels natural, which if you're anything like me, suddenly you'll wake up one day and realize, holy cow, I actually did it. I've shifted the way that I feel. I've shifted what feels comfortable to me, and I'm in a completely different state. I feel completely different about myself. I look at the world completely differently. Things are changing for me and happening differently for me because of these shifts. And it just happened. I don't know. I have never found that moment where I'm like, yes, in this moment, it's gone from unnatural to natural. It's always happened where I look back in hindsight and suddenly I'm there, because you shift so much throughout the day. So start picking where you want to dwell. So again, you're going to get curious, you're going to make a plan, and you're going to give yourself reminders. I hope that this helps, and I will have my regular podcast episode on Wednesday of this week. So here in just a couple of days, and I will talk to you soon. Thank you so much for joining today. If you found the episode useful, please share it with your network or leave me a rating or review. It helps me get my message to more people, and I would greatly appreciate it. If you'd like to learn more about me, you can visit my website. It's ceciliahendricks.com.